Story 1. I don't think the dichotomy of men wanting hookups and women wanting relationships is true. I think it's more due to the fact that women have higher thresholds for partners, while men are willing to have casual sex with women below their partner standard. This is what causes the feeling in women that men only want flings. Story 2. It depends. It depends on the person. It is true that at a time women held the key to sex and men the key to marriage, but I know of so many couples where it is the guy who wants to have a serious relationship and it is the girl who wants to hook up. We are taught that it should be the girl seeking a relationship and the guy wanting sex, but that is often a stereotype and not a reflection of reality. The reality is that each person is different. Story 3. I think it's highly dependent on age. In my experience, both are easier for young women under 30, but dating for a relationship is easier for men over 30. I think this comes from women being willing to date up in age and economic class but not down. Story 4. That's really interesting. I think it depends on age a bit too, maybe. I had an awful time in college. Hookups were manageable, but relationships were harder for me. But since college, I really haven't had any problem finding a relationship. I can't speak to women's experiences, but this sounds right. Story 5. I have never wanted anything other than a serious relationship. I have also always seemed to have my pick of a lot more women than I think I should be capable of attracting. I think that being genuine and serious about a relationship, in conjunction with seeing how happy I have made my partner, makes me way more attractive in a relationship than makes sense on paper. So I agree. Of course, I have never tried to hook up either, so I have no idea how difficult that would be in my situation. Story 6. I'm in my early 20s, and yes, as a female who's in decent shape, it's not very hard for me to get laid if I really want to. But the problem is, I don't want to get laid. I want something serious first, and almost every guy in my age range just wants something casual. If one of them wanted something serious, I'd naturally bring my attention to him over anyone else. So yes, I think it's quite a bit easier as a woman to find hookups, but for anything more, well, it's pretty damn hard. I've also got to sift through the men leading you on in hopes for just a lay. Or there may just be something wrong with me in particular, and this isn't a common experience. Story 7. I think this is kind of true. Women are far less likely to deceive men to get sex, far less likely to pretend they like someone just to continue being intimate with them. A lot of guys will do this. It's very easy for a girl to attract someone if she's even the least bit attractive. But even attractive guys can have trouble finding someone for intimacy in a short amount of time. On the other hand, if a girl acts like she likes a guy she's being intimate with, she's probably telling the truth. Yes, some girls lead guys on to get what they want, but usually they won't be intimate with these guys. In contrast, plenty of guys will act basically like a boyfriend but never commit, so a lot of girls find themselves investing much more into something, thinking it was going somewhere, only to find out there was no chance from the beginning. From my personal experience, if I really like a girl I'm being intimate with and feel a connection, it usually turns into a relationship. However, I've heard many stories from girls about being led on by the perceived or actual promise of a relationship until they find out the guy was never interested in her that way. How often do you hear about a girl maintaining multiple relationships? I'm sure it happens, but I've never encountered it. I have, however, heard of multiple guys doing this, including one who was engaged to his girlfriend of 3 years and was dating a friend of mine for 6 months without either knowing. Story 8. In heterosexual relationships, women are the gatekeepers of sex. This is simply due to the fact that women have more risk in casual hookups or serious coupling. It's exactly why apps like Bumble exist and work well. This creates a hunter and prey situation, no matter how much we try to buck our biological nature through equality-based social mechanisms like female empowerment. Women have many options and a lot of risk. It's easier to just grab any casual hookup, but that also means they have to sift through dozens of unsuitable partners to find someone who is actually worth their time. Meanwhile, men have minimal options and minimal risk. This doesn't make relationships easier to acquire for men, because sometimes they have no options, whereas women at least have a handful of unsuitable partners available. Men don't have to sift through a bunch of poor options because they likely only have 1 or 2 options to begin with, rather than a plethora of poor choices. Story 9. I think both are easier for women, at least in the modern day. Women have an easier time getting hookups. The majority of relationships these days involve sex before they officially date. Women have more dating opportunities as a result. Of course, women get led on and face a whole list of other issues as well, but I'd say still both are easier for women. For men, it's more about, can I find anyone? Versus for women, it's how good of a man can I find? Luxury of choice. Story 10. Sounds like nonsense. Why would it be easier for a man to find a serious relationship if it's harder for him to find a casual one? Step 2 only follows step 1. If you can't achieve step 1, attracting someone, you're never going to achieve step 2, forming a relationship. Story 11. No, dating on the whole is easier for women, but because they squabble over the same men, they think it's hard. Check the Tinder statistics out, for goodness sake. It's like 5% of the profiles are right-swiped. You mean to tell me 95% of the men aren't good enough for the average woman? Have at it. Story 12. The dating pool is brutal and honestly gets worse as you get older. The really good ones choose each other and get married. That's the harsh truth. Not even bitter, by the way, just how I see it. Funny enough, I'm a guy and I can hook up really easily, but finding a quality woman who also wants a long-term relationship is difficult. Women who I'm not attracted to want that long-term relationship, but the women I am attracted to want to talk for a month and have sex for a month before moving on. Brutal. Story 13. As a guy wanting a serious relationship, all I found is girls wanting hookups, so I think it might be the opposite. It seems like most girls these days aren't down for commitment. Story 14. It's utter nonsense. The biggest problem is that men don't want only hookups to the same degree that women want only relationships. For men, it's really difficult to get a woman from zero to wanting a hookup, and then a little difficult to get them from wanting a hookup to wanting a relationship. For women, it's basically effortless to get a man to go from zero to wanting a hookup, and then moderately difficult to get them from wanting a hookup to wanting a relationship. The whole zero to relationship problem is way easier overall for women, especially once you factor in the fact that women can easily have literally hundreds of times more people interested in them to start. This whole thing is a skewed perception stereotype. The main difficulty comes in different places, but it's not the only difficult part. Men complain no one wants to have sex with them. Women complain that they can't find a man who wants to be in a relationship. On top of that, a good guy, showing that they aren't even lowering their standards much or at all. This leads to stereotyping the entire other gender. The biggest issue here is that these stereotypes are not equally true, and the perception from the women's side completely ignores the massive difficulty in getting any initial interest. I think for hard proof, men are generally willing to lower their standards a lot for hookups, while women generally have very high standards. But for relationships, men will have somewhat restrictive standards, which is why women get stuck at this point, but women will still have even higher standards. Like for hookups, men are okay with 70% of women, but women are only okay with 15% of guys. And for relationships, men are okay with 15% of women and women are okay with 10% of men. Men are not gatekeeping commitment any more than women. It's hard for everyone out there, but it's clearly harder for men overall. It's ridiculous that for men it's harder at 8 out of 10 stages, and for women it's harder at 2 out of 10 stages, and we pretend it's equal. It's nonsense. Of course, I am only addressing the difficulty of going from zero interest to relationship. Women, on average, face much more risk of dating violence. I can't comment on any other aspect of the gendered experience. Story 15. As a side note, gay guys are pretty messed up. Hookups or one-night stands are laughably easy, like 10 minutes including travel, but long-term dating is extremely hard and basically impossible in most places. Source: gay guy that lives in the Midwest. There's a special kind of bigotry here. Story 16. I am a woman and I do not do hookups. I prefer serious relationships. So I think this statement is pretty subjective and depends on the preferences of the individual person. Story 17. True story. I've had that conversation with a few of my female friends. If just an average-looking woman walked into pretty much any bar and walked up to a guy and said, "I want to get laid right now, come with me." If he doesn't have a girlfriend or wife, he's going. A guy is not going to get the same result unless he's extremely attractive, and even then, he's going to have to go through a few girls before he gets one to agree. It took me 5 years between my last girlfriend and my wife. I wasn't celibate, but the first 3 years I was just playing the field and having fun. Then it took 2 years for me to meet a woman that met the criteria of relationship material. I have the example of many intelligent, strong, confident, capable, independent women in my family. None of them needed a mate. They wanted their mates. It would be disrespectful to bring home anything less. I've been with my wife for almost 27 years now. Story 18. I find this to be true. Most women want a relationship, most men want hookups in my experience. If a guy wants a relationship, the chances are higher for him to stumble upon a woman who wants that too. Women have to sift through a lot of hookup guys to find one who wants something more. Story 19. I think it's a silly statement not based in reality. Men don't have it easier in finding relationships. We have fewer options statistically, whereas women have more. It's pretty understandable that this discrepancy would yield stronger results for hookups and relationships for women in both areas. It is also irrefutable that a lot of women have side options or orbiters, which is a privilege only higher status, top-tier genetic men can acquire. Idoran said it well. I don't think the dichotomy of men wanting hookups and women wanting relationships is that true. I think it's more due to the fact that women have higher thresholds for partners, while men are willing to have casual sex with women below their partner standard. And this is what causes this feeling in women that men only want flings. Well said. The only time it's easier for me to hook up is with women I don't find to be relationship material, and most women I find on the apps are using them exclusively for advertising themselves for money or attention. Story 20. If the dating field were equal, then I would agree. Generally, men, whether it's for a relationship or sex, will have to put in more effort to initiate and establish the dynamic. Women generally just have to wait for a guy to approach them. Story 21. I don't agree with that for the simple reason that standards for a hookup are much lower than for a serious relationship. Only physical aspects really matter there, whereas for a serious relationship, they need to have similar lifestyles, interests, goals, and so on. Unless you count having lovers mooch off you as a serious relationship, it's definitely not easy. Story 22. I just want a woman who both likes me for who I am and won't pressure me into sex just to leave right after. You'd think such a short list would give me options, but I'm only 24, and finding a woman like this who didn't become a mom at 18 or 20, I'm just not mentally mature enough to take on a father role yet. In my age group is tough. Maybe I'm looking in the wrong places or not looking much at all, but that's where I'm at right now. Story 23. I think this is true when it comes to finding and initiating dates with these two different goals in mind, but then I think the inverse is true when it comes to actually succeeding or completing those two goals. For example, it's harder for women to successfully date casually without catching feelings, and it's harder for men to successfully maintain a serious relationship versus a fling. Story 24. I am going to speak from my experience. I am 48 and have cerebral palsy. I walk and talk fine, just a limp. It's obvious. Imagine having the numbers disadvantage plus discrimination. Having a woman introduce herself by calling me a retard. I have to be twice as good in order to get half of the respect. It's a catch-22. Be silent and get nothing, or stand up for myself and be called a troublemaker. I will admit to my mistakes, but other people's bad behavior towards me is always my fault. Story 25. I agree, mostly in the sense that men are more likely to pretend to be serious or committed to the relationship just to have physical intimacy, which can emotionally traumatize women in the process. Probably. Story 26. The elephant in the room that no one is talking about is that we want different things at different ages. At 20, I was into hooking up, although I wasn't opposed to a relationship. At 30, I was into a relationship, although I wasn't opposed to hooking up. At 40, I gave up on both and just focused on being the most awesome me I can be, and I'm not really opposed to hooking up or relationships, but I'm not actively seeking either. As a woman, I only found it easier when I was 18 to 25, although you really had to watch your own back at that age range because men can be very, very dangerous and women can be too trusting and naive. And none of this is easy for anyone. I really wish we could, as a society, knock it off with the who has it harder Olympics. That mentality is not really helping anyone. Instead, we should be thinking about what do I bring to the party? What is my contribution to whatever it is that I want? What do I want? Figure out all that before you worry about who has it harder. Story 27. I disagree. I believe women tend to have it easier both ways because men are usually the ones doing the initiating and pursuing. Does it mean they are guaranteed to find what they are looking for? Not in the slightest, but a good portion have something many men do not have: options.